This many void rays? What could possibly go wrong?
That ain't Falco. That ain't Falco.
Welcome back to StarCraft 2, ladies and gentlemen. By far, one of the most confusing commanders in the game. And I know me saying that, I'm gonna get a lot of StarCraft 2 fans really angry. But you can't convince me that an aggressive style commander with aggressive troops that have no defense, or even defensive structures, with more economic ruin than 2020, that has to play defensively. I am not making this stuff up. Her kit is so damage oriented, you actually have to hide in a corner to actually be safe. I use the word hiding really loosely when really it's cloaking. And all you have to do to be successful with her is just remember the golden rule: must be cloaked at all times. If there is a unit or a structure on the battlefield, whether it is sitting at your base or out in the field, if it is not cloaked, it is in extreme danger. So with the golden rule in mind of everything needs to be cloaked at all times, the question comes to mind of why do you need to cloak? And how do you need to cloak? The first method of how to cloak with Vorazun is permacloak. This means that there are some units in her arsenal that already start out with permanent cloaking. It's very limited, but highly required and insanely powerful. The only affected units that actually have permacloak is the Dark Templar and the Shadow Guard. The Shadow Guard, of course, being a call-down ability, costing a whopping 50 energy to put down. Starting out with 2 can be upgraded to 4 Shadow Guards with a limited time, really good for opening up bases for expansion early or saving yourself in the beginning wave. Dark Templars are also another permanent unit that is able to have cloaking all of the time. They are the exact same as Shadow Guard. The difference is that they cost a lot to put out on the battlefield, but they have an unlimited life. Let's be honest here, it's more about how much bullets they can take, and judging by their total health, not a lot. Taking a more basic form in the form of cloaking, of course, is through upgrades. Certain units in Vorazun's arsenal has access to be able to have permanent cloaking, but doesn't start out with it. And trust me, the units that have this upgrade genuinely need it. The last method, a similar ability to Artanis' energy field, except an actual pylon is placed on the map. The whole dark part of the pylon is not actually from the pylon itself. However, I can't complain about the pylon. The pylon looks really cool. The dark part of the pylon is actually a giant cloaking field where everything inside of that power area becomes cloaked except the pylon itself, along with any other pylons.
You must construct additional pylons.
No matter how much times I hear that, I still hate it. The why should be really simple because cloaking is a natural defense for any unit that relies on not being detected or not taking a lot of damage in the first place. Cloaking also provides another big benefit, which makes the units excessively more powerful, increasing damage by 15% to all cloaked units, whether they are in a cloaking field or they have their own personal cloaking. But the real power of cloaking comes at level 7, surprisingly, not the level 15 upgrade like that damage buff. I'm talking, of course, about Veil of Shadows, where all cloaked units, whether they have their own personal cloaking or is affected by a cloaking field of rather yours or your allies, get a 400% increase to shield regeneration rate, making Dark Pylons a basically mobile power-up and healing field. Which of course begs the question of, what about her defenses? Does she have any way to defend herself rather than to use abilities or other units? See, normally defenses are used to protect something sacred to someone, something as important as, let's say, home. And normally Vorazun would have defenses to protect her home, but her home is, yeah. Units, of course, will have their strengths and their weaknesses, but it all falls down to a scale between stupidly dumb and insanely powerful that shouldn't exist. Take the most basic of units as Zealots, which actually in her form become Centurions, taking away the giant area of effect Spinning Axe into a sprint tackle ability that's able to stun enemies for a few seconds. Spamming in large numbers? Not really that effective though. Of course, these abilities of actually being able to stun is of course upgraded. So honestly, if you want a good laugh, make an army of these guys. But if you actually wanna, I don't know, win the mission, really don't make them late or mid or even early game. There's better alternatives. The Stalker, in my opinion, is the best, cheapest, and low tier unit that she has to be able to use for her army. Of course, what I mean by cheap, I'm talking Protoss effect cheap. So we're talking more affordable than the other expensive units. You're not going to get a good deal on these guys, trust me. Different from their Dragoon counterparts of having a higher rate of fire and mobility at the cost of damage and health. Don't let this get to your head though, because if you think that they're weak because they have a lower amount of damage, that is the complete opposite. Most important out of all of these units, these guys have air and ground coverage, making them good for even late game. But most importantly, the most important fact about these units is spamming is recommended. In other words, the fun way to play the game. Just keep an eye on their health bars, because bad positioning, even while cloaked, can mean the death of them. Being very, well, damage-oriented, Vorazun has found a way to even weaponize support units, so much so that they actually become spammable to a certain degree. Oracles, mainly used as a mini Death Star that use their own energy supply, which is normally used to cast abilities, turns into their actual ammo, turning a fast and upgradable permanent cloaking unit into a ground troop's worst nightmare. Just remember at the end of the day that the unit, despite having an alarming amount of damage output, it is still a support unit with detection, and the health is balanced out by the relatively cheap cost. Before you think about spamming these units to make up your entire army, make sure you have some air support, as Oracles are not able to hit other air targets. Which leads me all the way to Corsairs. Air superiority fighters, while not capable of hitting any ground targets, but are able to do an absurd amount of damage against other air targets. You're most likely going to be using Oracles and Corsairs together almost at all times because they compensate each other. However, Corsairs are not completely useless when it comes to ground. See, they're able to drop these electromagnetic bombs, and these bombs, basically anything in the area, most importantly, units cannot attack while in the targeted area. But the entire effect of these bombs is actually reflected on the amount of Corsairs versus the actual strength of the bomb itself. See, a small number of Corsairs will drop a small amount of bombs, therefore covering a very small and very spaced out area. You have a large army, like 50% or more, you will able to disable an entire army or an entire enemy base. Being damage oriented doesn't always mean that every upgrade is just a flat damage increase or rate of fire increase. Sometimes, however, it takes the form of more presenting new opportunities to do more damage. Finishing off the top bar of Vorazun, the Spear of Adun stands by Dark Pylons and Shadow Guards, like I mentioned before. It also carries other abilities that allow Vorazun to deal damage in situations that would normally be acting out in a form of defense. Trust me when I say this, they're like super self-explanatory as possibly as they can get. The Black Hole, costing a whopping 25% of your energy and has 0 cooldown. Yes, you can pop it down as much as possible as long as you have the energy for it. However, there are better uses for it. However, this all makes up for its small area coverage due to the amount of that you can put down at once. Being able to pull any enemy inside, besides a few bosses, into the middle for a few seconds. This ability has great synergies with other commanders that have AoE at all, or even just have a strong AoE. This, however, is enhanced even more, even if you don't have access to AoE, with the Event Horizon upgrade. Now, what this upgrade does is that any enemy, whether it is a strong unit, a weak unit, a cheap unit, or an expensive unit, their defense value will be reduced to 0. Time Stop. An ability that I shouldn't have to explain, but for the sake of the video, here you go. An ability that is so easy to explain, yet stupidly overpowered for what it can do for you. Having a massive 360-second cooldown, which, by the way, cannot be reduced whatsoever, is able to cover the entire map, which again makes sense for the very long cooldown, is that enemies that you don't see or enemies that you see directly are going to be frozen in time for around maybe 8 seconds. So is the ability stupidly overpowered, yet also does it make sense for the story, considering this could have been prevented? Yes, it could. But relying on the ability every so often or in every fight, no. You're not going to be having the ability often enough to rely on every fight, so use it sparingly, trust me. Looping back around to the main strength of Vorazun is offense in a defensive manner. Space laser pointers that you saw in the beginning of the video, also known as Void Rays. Due to Time Stop, you have now become the master of time. Now, it's about becoming the master of space. However, space is found on both ground and air, which is quite utterly dominated by Void Rays in large numbers. Damage output being the main focus for the Void Rays, dealing an absurd amount of damage the longer the beam focuses on a single target. The bigger the target, the more damage you are capable of dealing. This is especially really useful when it comes to bosses, mainly having the weakness of AoE and anti-air due to Void Rays having to stick close to one another, creating an essential kill box all around them while also making them extremely vulnerable. With health in short supply, whether you are cloaked or not, you have to make sure the enemies do not swarm or get close at all, making upgrades like more range and more attack damage completely vital to the life of a Void Ray. Void Rays, to be honest, are probably going to be your bread and butter, because it doesn't matter if the target is big or small, air or ground, boss or not. They will not be surviving the damage output as much as the Void Rays can't take that damage. Switching from all attack to, well, I guess still all attack, but having a massive amount of defense for once, if you count defense as having excessive amounts of shields. Archons return to the battlefield, but as you can see, these Archons are changed in a way pylons are changed to dark pylons. Of course, this being Dark Archons. I know, original name, right? Dark Archons are similar to Artanis' Archons as a unit while having key differences like actually being affordable. These Archons this time around don't take too expensive units to combine into it. They start out as Archons. Taking away the bonus to biological targets for affordability, the Dark Archons give a greater significance to the golden rule for Vorazun as shield regeneration becomes vital with a whopping 500 shields and a whopping 10 amount of health. But the major differences comes from the abilities more than the appearance, as the regular Archons are capable of retaining the powers of High Templars like area control and AoE, like the Electrical Storm, while Dark Archons have an entire new set of abilities, being able to mind control enemy units permanently. Yes, you can take over an entire Ultralisk to add to your army. Just be sure to cast a ability that takes all of the Dark Archon's energy after you hit maximum population, because they will count towards that. Ending off the video as usual with Mastery perks, which do play a very important role for Vorazun, where most come down to personal choice. Power Set 1 is an easy one, as Dark Pylon range greatly outmatches Black Hole duration. The expanded size of the pylon not only means that you can just power your base with a single pylon, it also means that your entire armory can get the benefits from cloaking rather than a small portion of it if you don't upgrade it. Power Set 2 comes down to personal preference, as Shadow Guard duration overall makes the early game much faster, while time stop unit speed increase makes for a devastating endgame on your side. So at that point, take your pick. Finally, Power Set 3 again becomes down to personal choice, as Chrono Boost efficiency will always be a solid and great ability. I just personally go with Spear of Adun energy, so I can start out and cast abilities like Shadow Guard and Dark Pylons much earlier than you're supposed to. And that is about it. In summary, that's basically how you play Vorazun. It sounds complicated, but trust me, it actually isn't as bad. As usual, Vorazun comes in the pack with all of the campaigns, so I do recommend everyone pick that up when you can, because the game is already free as it is. And no, I'm not sponsored by StarCraft or Blizzard for that fact. I wish I was. Just remember at the end of the day that the golden rule of must be cloaked at all times, you need to always remember that. Because even though you have a very offensive focused army, you still need to play quite defensively while you're on the offense. Again, that's the thing that really doesn't make any sense, especially the time stop. That also doesn't make sense as well. With all that being said, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and next time we are going to be looking into the greatest turtle in the galaxy, known as Carax. This is Toxic Spill. If you love what you are seeing here, be sure to scroll down below and hit that subscribe button to keep up to date with all of the content. I hope you all have a great day. Peace.